We are here at PAX East, and I'm here at Drinkbox Studios, where they're showing off not only the Guacamelee update, but also their newest game, Severed. I'm with Graham, and first of all, I'd like to know, the Severed is a very different world compared to the likes of your previous games, Tales from Space, About a Blob, and its games, as well as this one, Guacamelee. What is happening in the world of Severed?
So you're right, Severed is very different in tone and in gameplay from our previous games. It's a first-person dungeon crawler where you play as a young lady who's lost her arm. She's searching for her family. It's exploring like more serious themes of like death and loss, and it has like a touch-based sword fighting mechanics. So everything about Severed is different from our previous games. You work on platformers, silly, funny platformers for 6 years, and it's like, okay, let's try something completely different for a little while, and then we'll come back to that stuff again later on.
Now, how do players progress through this game? Now, the demo is pretty linear in nature. Is it going to be from like a dungeon to dungeon to dungeon, or is it going to be like a more open experience?
So the plan for the game, we're still like experimenting with different things, but I would say like the high level experience is kind of like Legend of Zelda, how there's a big overworld with dungeons that you're trying to, you're doing the dungeons in a specific order. You're gaining new powers as you do each dungeon. But then within dungeons, each dungeon is going to be quite large, and there will be backtracking. You'll be environmental puzzle solving, and there might be reasons to come back to a dungeon once you've gained powers from later dungeons. So you might see some portal that you're not able to open when you're in the first dungeon, but then when you finish the third dungeon, you figure out, oh, that's how you open that portal. You can go back and get to like a new secret area, get some other upgrades. That's kind of the high-level structure of the game.
Now, the heroine is given a sword, a very unique sword early in the game. What else is she going to be able to use to defend herself?
So once the player gets the sword, they're quickly taught how to sever enemies. So your sword comes along with a charge meter that while you're fighting, if you're fighting well, your charge meter will go up. If you're getting hit or if you're being blocked, your charge meter goes down. But when your charge meter is full, you're able to tap an enemy, which puts them in this mode where you can cut them up. And then you can collect their body parts, and you use their body parts as upgrades to your equipment and your abilities. When you fight bosses in the game, you cut them up and you take parts of their body and equip them on yourself. So in the demo, you fight the first boss in the game. It's like an owl you cut up, and then you can wear the owl's head as a helmet. And when you're fighting the boss is using some special abilities against you. When you cut them up and wear them, you gain that ability. So in the demo, the owl has like a flash attack, which it's kind of like a flashbang in first-person shooter games where like the screen goes white, you can't see anything for a while. Once you've gained that ability, you're able to use that when you're fighting multiple enemies. You can stun an enemy or a few enemies so that it's less hectic in the room with you, and you can deal with the enemies that are not stunned and then come back to the ones who are stunned. So that's kind of how the player will progress over time. Like as you're fighting bosses, you gain new abilities. You're cutting up all the enemies to get body parts to upgrade your abilities.
Now, the enemies are very unique. They're grotesque, but in a beautiful sort of way.
We try to make every enemy different from every other enemy. Like one of the big inspirations from the very start of this project was to try and use Mike Tyson's Punch-Out as in that game, you're kind of like the first time you're fighting a guy, you're experimenting with him, like figuring out how do I deal with this guy. So yeah, in Severed, each time we present a new enemy to you, you're going to be like, oh, how do you do this guy? You experiment, you figure him out, and then you start fighting him along with other enemies that you've already encountered before, and they all have different attacks. They all have to be dealt with differently. So the player will have to when they're dropped in a room with 4 enemies, they have to quickly figure out who's the biggest threat in this room? Who should I leave till last? And it's part of the strategy of fighting.
Yeah, I mean, even in the boss battle, when they create a bunch of crows, you have to see which one is going to attack you first, or else you're going to get attacked by multiple at once.
That's right. Like at the bottom of the screen, there's little icons that show you, it basically shows you the order of the attacks that are going to come, as well as the enemy's health. So you can use that stuff to assess what's the most immediate threat, and then you can switch to that guy, take him out, or incapacitate him, and then switch to the next immediate threat.
Yeah, and now I mentioned that the world is very unique, much like the enemies themselves. What feeling do you want the players to feel when they're traveling through this world?
So the world is very different. It's kind of a surreal, it's surreal, but also a little bit gross. We want the player to feel uneasy when they're interacting. And originally in the dungeon, we had like your typical door with a key that you would open, and we're like, this is too normal. What can we do to make this? What can we make it do to make it a little bit uncomfortable for people? So now it's like a living door that when you tap it, it makes a squishing noise, and the key is like a weird mouth thing that you use. So, and all the enemies are kind of like that too. Like we want the player to feel a little bit uneasy. and also just try and be. We also want to try and be creative at the same time.
Now, this is a very unique soundtrack. You're working alongside, I'm going to mess this up, you have Yamantaka, Sonic Titan, and Panatayo. How did you go to work collaborating with these people?
We met Yamantaka Sonic Titan a long time ago, like when we just first started the company, like almost 7 years ago. They're really into playing video games. They love video games. They did some songs for Mark of the Ninja, the end credit theme songs. And they live in Toronto, and we're in Toronto. So we met them at an event, like a networking event, a long time ago. We love their music. They do like some really cool like prog rock, like indie prog rock stuff. So when we were thinking about what kind of music do we want in Severed, we were listening to a lot of different local bands. It just like we wanted to try and do a collaboration. And so then we approached them, and then they had been working with Pantayo on some other stuff. So they suggested that we do this like collaboration with both of them, and it's been really working out well. The music that they're creating is fantastic for the game. So.
And this game is actually going to exclusively launch exclusively on the PlayStation Vita. What are you doing to leverage that platform with this game?
The one great thing about the Vita is all the combat in the game is using the touchscreen, but then the navigation on the Vita you can use the thumbsticks, which is really nice because it just feels more natural to walk around the world using thumbsticks. People are really used to that. When you're doing navigation with the touchscreen, it's not as intuitive. It's still definitely possible and it works okay, but it's not as intuitive. So it just felt like a natural fit. Plus, we've released so many games on Vita, and we love the Vita. We love working with Sony. So yeah, it just felt natural to release it on the Vita first. Yeah.
And when releasing, what are you looking for a timeline for its release?
So we don't want to release it until we're really happy with it, but like right now we're targeting summertime for release. Yeah.
So keep your eye out there, and be sure not to sever your hand before you play this game. I don't know.